those timelines are realistic if the people engaged on them don't have to do their normal day job.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast focused on blending research and practical advice to help today's HR, talent, and learning leaders improve business outcomes. Let's welcome your host, Ben Eubanks.
Hello everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Today's going to be a fun discussion because we talk a lot about HR technology here on the show. Learning technology, talent technology, across the spectrum. It's one of those things that is a core part of what I do, what we do at Lighthouse, and one of the things that I love. Obviously written the book about AI and HR technology, so there's a lot of good stuff going on there. But one of the things that we don't touch on very much are some of the really practical things that you need to know to think about as you are selecting, implementing technology, things like that. One of the great shows that I did with George LaRock, I'll make sure to link it in the show notes. I did a show with George LaRock maybe a year ago now. It seems like a lot longer. We did a show together called Vendor Demo Makeovers and looked at some of the key mistakes and challenges for you to think through as you're planning a demo, things to ask, and also things for the vendors to think about as they're doing that, so that they're doing the right job, I guess, doing it well. So that was one of the fun things that we did, and we're actually talking about doing maybe an update of that. Would be fun to do and revisit that topic and look at some of the other mistakes and challenges and opportunities there. But one of the things that I also was thinking about is, what about on the implementation side? We talk so much about everything that happens before you actually pick that technology. What happens after you've signed that contract and you have to start making it real? It's no longer theory. It's no longer in the future. It is right now happening, and you are neck deep in it. So I actually invited a good friend on the show, Caleb Fullhart. He and I have had a lot of good conversations over the years. He is incredibly sharp on technology, and as you'll hear, his company he works for, he does a lot of Workday implementations, just implementations of HCM technology broadly. And the thing that he brings to the table, you'll hear it clearly. He has a lot of experience in, here's the top things that employers almost always mess up on, or here's the things you need to think about so that you can make sure that this is a success for you, for your career, for your company, all those different factors playing into the conversation there. And so it's a really interesting conversation with Caleb, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you want to see more of the ideas and everything else that Caleb shares, he actually is very active on the HR open source, HROS Facebook group. It's a free group you can join. Lots of really good people ask questions there, share content there, and every single time in the past, I've seen someone ask a question about either Workday or about technology implementation. Caleb's one of the first ones to jump in, chime in, share his thoughts. Again, he brings a wealth of knowledge to that. So if that's something you're looking for, or you're looking to plug into a good group, that's a great one. That's one of the few that I actually stay in touch with, kind of stay in tune with, look at on a regular basis, just because I don't know about you, but so many LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups get overcome by spam after a little while. Once they get a good critical mass, they become a target for everybody to just dump their links and their spam and all their other self-promotional stuff. And HROS is really well policed by Robin and some of the other team over there. So absolutely recommend you check that out. Didn't mean for this to be an ad for them, but they're doing good things there, and it's a nonprofit organization really just dedicated to making HR better for the practitioners, which is the same thing that I believe in, same thing that I'm aligned with, and the reason I do what I do. So anyway, good conversation there with Caleb. I hope you enjoy the show. If you get anything helpful out of it, please do me a favor, share this with a friend, send this to someone you know who is thinking about buying technology or has just signed the contract and is like, okay, now I'm staring down the barrel of this thing and I've got to figure out how to make it happen, make it real. Share this with someone else, like it, comment, give us a review on iTunes, any of those things. We would be eternally grateful. It's a really great opportunity to help someone else make their day a little better. So thank you for listening to the show. We appreciate it. Now, on with the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host. So glad to have you here. So you've heard me talk about HR technology for quite a while now. The show's coming up on 3 years old, and we've talked about it dozens of times and dozens of episodes because it's a big part of the world of work today. The tools in the market are pretty impressive, but they're just that. They're tools. They need someone to build them, to procure them, and to wield them properly if they're going to really get the intended results. So last year, it's funny because I actually spoke with George LaRock, a good friend of the show, on vendor demos, the good, the bad, the ugly. We offered a lot of advice there, but I also was thinking, like, what about the other side of that? What about the implementation side? We've selected technology, we're thinking about putting it and rolling it out, and how do we make sure we do that right? And so with that in mind, I thought the second piece in our series would be a fun do's and don'ts, some of the common mistakes, things like that around implementations. And so to walk us through the conversation today, I actually tapped Caleb Fullhart on the shoulder. He is a principal consultant at Srio Consulting. He gets to do this every day, and so I thought he'd be a really good sounding board for us, bring a lot of insight advice, maybe even some humor to this, because we all know these don't always go as expected. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And they never go as expected.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, never? Never. Like, there was that one time back in '87 where we had that project that worked out.
Yep.
Always. Yep. So tell me what you do. Tell us who you are, what you do, Caleb, so we can kind of get a feel for the kind of work you actually do day to day.
Yep. So I'm a principal consultant with Srio Consulting. It's been around for a little over a decade now. And my job is primarily working on, if they catch us early, working through on the client side of an implementation. I can explain more about the difference later. And otherwise, it's doing break-fixed reconfiguration and integration work for customers that are already on a platform.
Okay, excellent. I was going to say that, like you said, if they catch us early enough, we can help them make sure this plan goes right. If we don't,
right.
The break and fix, I think that speaks for itself about how those things can go, right?
Yep.
So how does someone actually get into that space? I'm curious, like, what your background is. What led you into this? What led you to this role? Were you a firefighter in a previous life? Like, now I've got to save someone's life in another sort of capacity. I'm kind of curious.
No. So I came up through talent acquisition. I was a recruiter, recruiter sourcer to recruiting manager, and I think the transition to the HRIS side of things happened was with Accenture when I was there with them for a couple of years, and really I had a boss, Susan Marlowe, hat tip to you, who recognized my ability to figure out what was actually going on with their systems and gave me the runway to fix it. So I applied my technical knowledge and my recruiting knowledge, and I guess we could say I started tinkering with it, but then that turned into full-fledged consulting, doing big projects.
Okay, very awesome. That's neat.
Yeah.
To think that the thing that I was thinking about when I talked about technology selection implementation is that for the average HR leader or talent leader, even learning technology, those people are that they do that job primarily, and so they might run across one or two implementations in their career, but in general, It's not something they think about. Okay, next year we're doing this, and 2 years from now we're going to do another one. It's not something that they have that often, and so it's so infrequent. They don't have a good sense of what the norms are, what sort of things to look out for, what those pitfalls are, everything else, right?
Yeah. It's definitely, I've learned probably more so in the last 5 years, the value of coming up through the business side of things and not the technical side. Knowing, everybody complains about an ATS that doesn't actually track applicants, right? Like that's a common gripe, but it's because the technical people that are building it have never been a recruiter, right? They don't know the pains, if you will, that they're trying to solve. And I think that's helped me a lot, especially when consulting on, the configuration or, business process stuff. Like, hey, well, it doesn't work that way because you're not expecting it to. So how do we adjust it to make it work the way you expect?
Absolutely. So some of the work that you do is actually as an implementation partner, right?
Yep.
And so tell us, again, the average person has no clue what in the world implementation partner is. We have all these visions in our head. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like, what your day, tell me about an example of a project, maybe something else where you would come in and support in that capacity.
Sure. So the way I personally, there's two types of implementation partners, and I'll talk to, I would say 95% of our work is on the Workday platform. And so I can speak to that mostly. Is you sign your paperwork with Workday and they say, hey, here's our recommended implementation partners. Here's our gold, silver, platinum, whatever. That's the Workday side implementation partner. That person, that company is charged with putting in Workday the way that Workday wants it to be put in. for lack of a better term. I'm on the client side of that. And really the biggest difference is on a client side implementation partner, it's working from the focus point of how do we make that implementation and system work, how the client's business works. And sometimes it seems like they might be the same, but a lot of times in these projects, they're kind of at competing goals, if you will. Just because the vendor side implementation partner really just wants the most viable product, put in, signed off, and move on down the road.
Yeah. It sounds like it's almost like when you're buying a house, having your buyer's agent kind of there representing you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. So I'm envisioning this in my head. I'm imagining you going to bat for me, sort of saying, no, this is how it's going to be.
Right.
Like helping
Right.
me to figure out how to approach the process, how to make sure I don't fall on my face. And, again, this is a career decision for a lot of HR leaders. I've been in organizations where someone starts the implementation process or starts the selection process and then leaves because I don't want to wreck my career with this, fall on my face. So doing it right versus doing it wrong can be a very big deal.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I never thought about it that way, but I might have to steal that and use it. But
Absolutely.
It's fairly accurate, right? You have, again, there's somewhat of a competing interest, even with the same goal in mind, but different drivers. Probably a better way of putting it.
Okay, very cool. So, give me an example of a project that's in your sweet spot, like someone comes to you and says, "Hey, we're about to implement this. We need some help with figuring out our business rules, figuring out what we need specifically. What sort of things are you going to help them with once they've finished that? They said they signed the paperwork. Now what?"
Yeah, so a lot of the sweet spot on an implementation like pre-go live is really we're your phone a friend, is a term I like to use, sitting in on the meetings and giving your implementation partner will give you how they want it to be done and say this is how you need to do it, right? Their goal is to put it in that fits into their framework. That may or may not work for your organization, but a lot of companies, like you said, haven't gone through, 5, 10 implementations and know what the possibilities are. I think the other thing that the insight that we give our clients is we have to deal with the system post go live, whereas the seller's agent doesn't. Right, you sign off on the paperwork and you're out. So it's a lot of our work is just saying, hey, yeah, I know they're saying that, but you can also do it this way too. And just so they have the full scope of options, we love those projects because those are the ones where they get it done right. They get it done so it works for them, and then they don't need us, and they don't refer us, right? Like those are the best projects. If you can get it in right the first time, it saves a ton of money, and you don't have to call me 6 months after go live saying, hey, Caleb, we can't get any of our reports to work and we don't know why.
Yeah. We just plop down a massive chunk of change for the system and can't make it do the basic things that we thought it was going to do for us. All the things that the salesperson told us it was going to do. We're still waiting to find those things.
We bought a Ferrari and we can't get it out of first gear.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's the thing that I'm thinking of. You're talking about that is, again, from your perspective, it's much more fun to come alongside and work with a company through those early stages and helping them versus getting that call. They're like, no, we're going to save the expense. We're going to do this ourselves. And 6 months later, they're like, crap, somebody call Caleb. Somebody give them a call because we are stuck and we are in a bad way. And by then, they've probably gone a little bit too far down that road to even be able to roll back some of those changes, probably.
Yeah, and the hard part is, especially from a post-go-live perspective, is, there's always a lot of, a hype and promotion of, hey, listen, we just bought this awesome system. It's going to do all of these things for us. And then, 6 weeks after go live, everybody's complaining because it doesn't do all the things that you promised to, or some of the things just don't work right, or it's clunky, or all these other stuff. You start losing that faith in the system, right?
Yes.
In which people start going back into their old habits of, hey, I'll just send you this spreadsheet for an offer. Those types of things that you have to then, it's a little bit harder to recover from because then it's just like, oh, no, we fixed it. And then they're going to be like, yeah, right, you did. It's kind of that change management piece of it. It makes it a lot easier if it works the way it's designed coming out.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Goodness, I'm having flashbacks to a time we had bought a system, and they were so proud, like we had just gone through all the process, we'd done all the testing, and got it up and running. But the problem is during the testing and everything else, they had never once run a report out of the system. They'd done everything else but run a report. And again, I'm thinking like all the different tools I've had in the past to just push a button and run something, or even have to develop the query myself to be able to run a report. And I was looking at the system like, this looks like it's written in another language. I have no idea having to get any information out of this thing that we've been shoving into it for the last month, and I've got to
Yeah.
get a report from my boss, the CEO, and I'm like, better call our person internally who was in charge of this and figure out if they have any clue what to do here. And it became, again, just this big nightmare for me. And so I'm again having flashbacks, a little trauma
Yeah.
there. So I appreciate you
Yep.
bringing that
Yep.
back to me.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry.
So let's talk through. There were a couple of big picture things that you see. We talked about this beforehand in our prep, but there were kind of three big mistakes employers make around timelines, reviews, and testing. So I'd love to walk through each of those, talk about
Yeah.
how to do it right, or think to think about, and so on. Sound good?
Yep. Yep.
So the first one is
Um,
timelines. Let's go for
yeah.
that.
So this is a big one. So, in a lot of, again, our projects are mostly Workday. So I'll kind of speak to that implementation process is you'll have your implementation partners sit down with you and you'll do your business process review, which we'll cover, but they'll sit there and lay out a project timeline for you and say, let's find out what's realistic, right? Like this is how long this should take. And I think the big thing that we find out or have experienced is those timelines are realistic if the people engaged on them don't have to do their normal day job. So, because you have these workbooks that have to be done and the data validation, data integrity that needs to be done, and then making sure that the loads are done properly. And those things take a lot of time and a lot of detail-oriented work. Um, the the hard part is, and where timelines get missed, is because their job doesn't stop. Their day job, right? Like you have these payroll worksheets that you have to fill out. You still have to run payroll, right? So you can't. It's that balancing act of how much time is dedicated to doing the implementation work and how much time is dedicated to doing your day job, if it will.
Yes.
A
Yes.
lot of those implementation plans that are being pushed out don't take into account how much time your day job takes. So, this is more important for that kind of the small to medium businesses where they're not going to have a complete project team that is 100% that like they're not pulling people out of their day job to do this 100%, right? They still need to keep the wheels on the bus. Those timelines, and when you sign off on them, they're going to hold you to them. So being mindful of that, and keep in mind the seller's agent, I'm going to keep using that term, the seller's agent wants it to be the most viable product as quickly as it can,
Yes.
right? That's their drive. They want to
Churn out
get
that
it.
widget.
Yep, let's get it done. Let's get it signed off on so we can go on to the next one because that's what we do. We have to turn these things. So, being steadfast in those conversations regarding signing off on a project timeline is a big one because they're going to be breathing down your neck to get your workbook in while you're sitting there trying to run payroll. Um, it's yes, a lot of companies can do it. It's just more stressful than it probably needs to be if you have those upfront conversations with them. And frankly, you're the one buying the system. You can say no. You can say that's not realistic
Yes.
because your hours are still your hours, right? Like you're purchasing a bucket of hours from the implementation partner. They can be deployed over a longer period of time. Now, they're not going to like that, but they can. And it just saves, I think you get a better product if you just slow the roll a little bit and make sure that it's realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing. Again, I've seen that myself, where you think, oh, yeah, sure, 30 days, 60 days, that's plenty of time to get to that thing, and you're like, Oh yeah, like I'm already going at 98% capacity doing my job, much less
Yeah,
having to squeeze those other things in around. And it's not like you can press pause like, hey, I know there's a sexual harassment thing going on over here. I know we've got to recruit those 25 people over there. I know we've got X, Y, and Z going, but we're going to pause that because we're getting new technology. Like, no, like there's not a chance of those things happening. And so
yeah,
I love the recommendation there. Be willing to push back. Be willing to
yeah,
again hold your own on those conversations. Don't feel like you have to just conform to someone else's timeline of what they
yeah,
think it's going to take you to do. I think it's really good
yeah.
advice.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's your product, right? Like the client who purchased it signed that check. It's their baby. Make sure it's the baby you want before you say, "Yep," before you sign on the dotted line saying, "Yeah, it's all good. Let's go live." It's a critical point where I think a lot of people are like, "Well, we've invested all this time. Yeah, it's close enough," and that causes issues.
Oh, goodness. Speaking of close enough, let's skip to the next
Yep,
one.
yep,
So business process review.
yep.
This is it seems like a very formal and just like a okay, do we really have to do that or not? But I think it's a critical piece. So talk about that a little
Yep.
bit, what it is and why you think it's important.
Yeah, it's really giving it's the blueprint for your architect team to build out how your company does different things, whether it's terminate, promote, demote people, transfer people, how you hire people, the process in which your talent acquisition process, um, all of the different things that require steps, right? Like how do we open a job rec? Do we want the manager to approve it? Do we want the manager's manager to approve it? Do we want the recruiter to approve it? Those types of things, they're configured in the system so that the system runs in the way that your business runs. Um, I think this is highly critical because it's the how does your engine run, right? Like how does a client do business? And every client's different. There's some clients that will
Whoa,
focus.
whoa, whoa. Are you saying that every company isn't exactly the same with the processes? I think
Right.
you must have missed something somewhere.
There is no cookie cutter approach to business process.
Oh, goodness
Um,
gracious.
and there really should be, right? Like you have,
Yes.
what's the culture of the company? The culture is, we empower our managers to open the jobs that we think they need to open. Well, then you don't need 32 approval steps above that. You just say, enter the job, the manager approves it, and you're off to the races. Or you have companies that like, hey, we need to, we have tight budget constraints. We need finance to approve a job right before it ever moves to the hiring manager. Those types of things. It's a critical step that is boring, to be honest with you. Like, you're locked in a room for 8 hours a day for, a week trying to figure out, put it onto paper how you do things
Yes.
is not the sexiest part of any implementation, but it's really important because that's how the system is going to flow once you go live.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity sometimes to say, okay, this is how we have done it, but we really need to, look at that because that system's not really working well. So let's, put it in the system how we want it to. That adds a different component to kind of your change management strategy.
Yes.
But it's an opportunity to really just drill in to how the company does stuff.
So how concrete is that decision that you make at the beginning? If again you're getting the call for the break and fix later, hey, we didn't
Yeah.
realize, but we have this different process and we didn't even think about that. Talk about how concrete those decisions are and how hard it is to change them later.
In the system, you can reconfigure them. And we do it on a pretty regular basis. And the biggest thing is over engineering. There's what people think is happening and what really happens are two different things sometimes. Um, it's, I'll give you the most common example is our CEO wants to sign off on all of the requisitions, right?
Yes.
Um, However, the CEO is probably the last person to ever log into the system,
Yes.
to actually approve them. So it's just like, oh, well, their admin actually does the approval. I'm like, okay, so then you assign it to the admin. You can change them. It's just, it's, it's like,
Costly.
yeah, well, it's like surgery, right? Like you're changing how your system flows, like the way it moves. So if you put more effort into the rigor around the definition in the beginning, the better your product's going to be, but also be mindful of, does it become overly cumbersome, right? Like, are these
Yes.
people people that are involved in that business process, are they going to do it? And
Absolutely.
a lot of times when we're doing, I'm doing some business. I'm at a client site in Atlanta right now, and we're doing business process reconfiguration because their current their go live business processes don't work because not everybody that wanted to be in the approvals actually wants to do the approvals, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to go in the system. I don't like it. That's stupid. Why do I have to do it there? Can't I just email you? And it's like, no, that's the whole point. So we're kind of going through that process again and just making it a little bit more streamlined. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting stuff. I like the surgery analogy, by the way. Like we're going in and trying to make this change. And now we're getting all the metaphors out there because
yeah,
technology is hard sometimes. And
yeah,
I'm trying to think about it. This is like you've got to get the preventive maintenance. You got to get the
yeah,
preventative care in place in up front.
yeah.
Make sure you got your good decisions up front so that later on there's less issues, complications,
Yeah,
risks, everything else that come along with that.
yeah, the preventive care one too is a huge piece. There's Workday does they have their biannual ones, which Workday 32 is coming out in a couple weeks now, and then you have like all these other updates as they go, and it's important for companies if you're going to spend the money on these things, take care of it,
Yeah.
right? Like just you gotta be aware of what's going on and making sure that everything that's coming out, because there's updates that they will push out to you that are system wide updates that you can't say no to because they apply it at a tenant level for everybody. Like this is how the system's changing, and if you don't keep up on those in time, your reports stop working, right? Like in time, if you're not swapping things out, and like you said, the preventive maintenance piece, it all adds up to a lot of broken and a lot of fix.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right. So the last one on our list, number
Yeah,
three, maybe not the last one, like we've covered a bunch more than just
yeah.
three, but the third one in our list we're going to talk about is testing. So again, it seems we've done all this business process review and everything else. Come on, Caleb, can we just get it going? Like I don't do I really need to test every little thing?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. A lot of it, one of the biggest takeaways from testing is the user acceptance piece of it, right? Are the people that are going to do the job day in and day out in the system, does it behave in a way that they expect it to? And really, I view the testing is not only checking the system and making sure that it's, bug free, error free, and working as designed, but also really gaining um, the confidence of the people that are going to use it and their excitement. When something works better in a new system than when it did before, right? Like let's use like the merit process. A lot of companies, mid-sized companies, will use a merit process. It's a spreadsheet, right? Like, okay, and then, it floats up to the managers. They had the review process that was done on paperwork, loaded into a spreadsheet. CFO signs off on it, CEO signs off on it, and then they have to figure out how to get these into a merit statement. So they're doing mail merge on an Excel spreadsheet, and then they're making sure that it's not email, that it's a secure password, and all this other stuff, right? When you put it in a system that does all of that for you and manages that whole process for you, and at the end of the day, your comp partner just says, disperse merit statement, and it all happens on a flip of a switch, that's really, really awesome, right? Like you just saved hours upon hours of work because the system was set up to do it for you. If you're not testing those things and it doesn't work right, not only is your expectation completely demolished because you're like, oh, this was supposed to be easy because it was in the demo, right? The demo, it worked perfectly, which is why we bought the system, and now it's not. That's where the testing gets caught, and the user acceptance piece of it is where the people will get the confidence they'll become your promoters of the system. Like, oh my God, this thing is awesome, you guys, you're going to love this. Or, hey, this works really, really slick. Can't wait till you can see it. And they work out those bugs. It's part of that change management strategy where you're getting that internal buy-in, which is
Absolutely.
huge.
One of the things I was thinking of as you're talking about that is you give the example of the merit statement thing. Like I remember doing those things. We did a massive batch of them once a year,
Yeah.
but I mean, when people are thinking about testing, even if like, okay, testing, I'm in on it. I can't. The comment I made earlier was facetious. Everyone's going to test something, but they're more likely to test those things that are frequent. I'm going to run a test payroll. I'm going to, promote someone. I'm going to hire someone. Like those basic things that happen every day, every week, every month. Like they'll do those things, but I would imagine those things like the merit piece or whatever else like happen less frequently. That might fall off the radar. So think about not just okay, this month and this quarter, what do I do? But hey, every third quarter we do this thing, and that might
Yep.
not have been in our list of things to test out. And thinking through some of those longer term pieces that might not be right there where you are in the calendar year when you're planning, but might be one of your things that recurs every single year. And again, you don't want to get to that point and find out, oh crap, it can't do this key part of my job that now I have to figure out a workaround for.
Right, right. Yeah, and testing can be like you have your overall, HCM testing, right? Like you're doing the core system piece of it. If you have your core working, like it should, you can do uh, some of these call them ancillary modules, right? So like advanced comp in Workday, it's one you can add on and can configure post go live and just layer it into your system. I would say from a testing perspective, just make sure that before you flip it on, if you will, in production where everyone's living, test it to make sure it works like you think it should. Because once you flip it on, you're exposing it basically to the general population or the people that have the security to see it, and you want it right.
Treat it like you would as if you were the employee that tries to find something wrong with everything. Like put
Yep.
that guy's hat on and try to like poke every hole in it that you can.
Oh,
That way when it goes live, you're like, okay, we have bulletproofed this, we franked proofed this or whatever
yep.
else.
Yeah.
Our guy was, what was his name? We had, kid you not, again, you're over in Atlanta today, so you'll feel me. We had a guy named Bubba, and that was his thing. Like Bubba
Yeah.
would go in there and mess with everything to try to find a way to mess it up or
Yep.
break it or whatever else. And so you had to Bubba proof it whenever we were doing something there. So
Yeah, those honestly, like get one or two of those in your pre go live testing session.
yes,
Those are the people you want in. Like I always start every testing session. I'm like, try to break it. Like don't be gentle. Don't like see if you can break it. That means there's something not set up right, and we need to find those things out. So
there's $10 in it for you. You try,
yeah,
try to find something wrong with it.
right. Again, I think it's worth the $10,
Oh
man.
yeah.
If they can uncover configuration errors, security errors, reporting errors in your sandbox environment or your preview environment, that's worth gold because then it gets fixed before it ever gets exposed to the rest of the company, and you have it's just you're starting off on a much more solid foundation.
Yeah. So even if everything works, it's still going to cost you that much in credibility
Right.
with the rest of the organization when things don't work as they should. Even if you ultimately fix it before it costs any further damage or issues or whatever else down
Right.
the line. So, oh goodness.
Yep.
I was going to ask you any other like practical advice, like a last tip, a takeaway for someone they're thinking like, you're talking to someone out there right now that's
Yeah.
either in the selection process or they've just bought something and they're thinking,
Yeah.
okay, like any last gold that Caleb give me is going to, save my bacon. Any other ideas you can share?
Yeah. I mean, the people that trust your gut is probably the best thing I can say, right? Like if something isn't setting right with you, ask more questions. Get to a point where especially the people that are signing off on the product, that final, yep, everything's working as designed, sign off. Trust your gut. Ask a lot of questions. It will annoy your implementation partner to no end, but that's okay. Like it's, and I tell my clients at the beginning, I'm like, listen, if something doesn't sound right or something isn't, if it's not striking you as accurate, ask me. Like, let's talk through it until you get that point where you're comfortable with it, because it's, again, these systems are not cheap to put in. Companies are spending millions of dollars, even just, millions of dollars a year for subscription fees, and then you're spending another 1 to 2 million on top of it for implementation. You're going to spend that money. You better love it.
Yes.
It better be everything that you expect it to be, and don't settle for less. Again, it's just, if something isn't jiving, something doesn't seem right, ask more questions.
Good deal. I love that. All right. So if someone wants to connect with you, learn more about the
Yeah.
work that you're doing, or just, ask you a
Say hi.
question, whatever else, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, shoot me an email, LinkedIn. My email is Caleb, Caleb, at Strio Consulting, Strio. My full name is Caleb Fullhart. I think I'm the only one on LinkedIn with that name. So you're probably good. But yeah, shoot me an email.
Awesome. Try to make a note to get your LinkedIn profile into the show notes so people can reach you there. Connect with you as the genius on this stuff. You do it every day. Again, it's like every time I see your name, for some reason I see you, like, I envision a life raft, just because, again, like the break and fix. Like, we had a conversation a couple years ago about analytics and Workday and some of the other systems and things, and I still think back to that now, and some of the same points we're talking through today were some of the same points that went through that conversation then. And so like, that's what I see you as, is this again, you like the part where you get to help them so that there's nothing broken and there's no drama, but
I like solving problems.
Yeah.
It's and I also like preventing them. That's probably the bigger piece. Is I like preventing problems.
Yes. The people that you're helping, they would rather help prevent the problem, I think, versus having to call you because they're solving one. Again, it's a funny balance, but it's the way it is. Some of us have to learn the hard way once or twice before we realize that we need someone in our life to help us out. So Caleb, I have so enjoyed the conversation today. Lots of good information, and it is clear, obviously, from everybody out there that you know your stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Anytime. Take care.
Absolutely. To everybody else, hope you enjoyed the conversation today. This has been Eubanks, your host, and we'll catch you next time on We're Only Human.
Thank you for listening to We're Only Human. Please take a moment to share this episode with another HR leader who might see it as a valuable resource in their daily work. For more information about the podcast and to see all our show archives, please visit upstarthr.com.